what do you make of where the war is at right now? What are the wins on the American side, the wins on the Iranian side, and what do you think will happen next?
Well, I'm not going to talk about individual who's bombing whom, because majority of this, if you're looking at it in a strategic standpoint of view, the U.S. Is in a dead end at the moment. Obviously, the administration doesn't know where to go. They want out, but they can't find their way out. The Iranians want revenge, which is why they continue to fire. But in the end, sooner or later, anyways, either or both sides will have to negotiate. But the problem for everybody involved, there's two problems. One, there's the Gulf Arabs that apparently are egging the U.S. on, which is, if it's true, that is, if it's true, it's suicidal for them because they will be destroyed in the process. So I don't know how much of that is actual fact versus media spin. But the main factor here that's absolutely keeping this conflict going, is going to keep this conflict going, is Israel, quite simply. Every time the U.S. is trying to, the U.S. bungled into a war it thought it was going to end in 4 days. It's been 36 days and counting, and there's no end in sight. No matter how much pain and suffering the U.S. unleashes on the Iranian people will take it, and the military is still functional, as we just saw yesterday. The so-called destroyed anti-aircraft systems are still quite functional.
Mm.
The problem for the U.S. is it can't win. It doesn't help anything that the longer this conflict goes. However, any attempt to try to get out of this conflict, you have the Netanyahu effect. Netanyahu absolutely needs this conflict for several reasons. For one thing, he needs not even so much the destruction of Iran as the destruction of the economy in the Persian Gulf. Because what you've got now is Netanyahu proposing Israel as the conduit for oil and gas to be moved through Israeli ports.
Yeah.
Out of the Persian Gulf. Here, build a new pipeline through Israel. That'll be great. And get on your knees in front of me is basically what he's telling to the Gulf Arabs at this point. Which, by the way, for the Emirates would mean total economic death, because they would be absolutely unneeded and irrelevant. They don't particularly produce oil and gas, and their position as finance centers, tourist centers, as trade centers would just evaporate instantly. There would be no need for them to exist, and they would cease to exist. Just like Venice ceased to exist in its time, and other Beirut ceased to exist as a center of economic wealth when it's all built on trade but not on manufacturing. And that's what Israel's trying to pull. And to do that, Israel is continuing to commit ever greater human rights abuses, or how else we're going to put it, war crimes on Iran anytime there's even something that looks like a possible meeting. I'm not even talking about negotiations outright. Any attempts at negotiations from either side, of course, Israelis are, well, so far aren't trying to kill off Americans trying to do negotiations, but they're doing it to the Iranians, or trying to do some kind of human rights attacks that will keep the Iranians from talking with the Americans. And so far, they're relatively successful. So where's this war going? Well, I'm hoping that the American side isn't insane enough to go put boots on the ground, but we may be facing that. And the purge of over a dozen generals over the last 3 days tends to point that, they may be actually going for that. Because when the chief of staff of the army is fired, and he seems to have been one of the people that's standing against Hexas orders to put boots on the ground into the suicide mission, that doesn't point very well toward a bright future.
Whew, there's a lot there. Let's talk about military capabilities, Iranian military, because we haven't spoken in a while, so there's a lot for us to cover. Iranian military capabilities. So there were reports initially, the majority of the missile launchers, probably when we spoke first in this war, the majority of the missile launchers were destroyed. Now we're sitting, the latest report yesterday was that only 50% of the missile launchers, instead of the 80-90% that was claimed earlier, were destroyed. Why that discrepancy? So there's different theories. One of them is the Americans have no idea. The intel was false, and it's pretty common that the intelligence is revised, number one. Number two is this is leaked intentionally to justify a ground operation. Is like now they can make the argument a lot of things are underground. We're not able to destroy it. We need to have ground on the troops to be able to achieve our objective, and that intel could be a piece of that puzzle to be able to make that argument. And the third one will be just Iran was able to um, deceive the American and Israeli intelligence and have a lot more missile launches that the Americans and Israelis did not even know about, instead of just having wrong intel on what was destroyed and what was not. What's your conclusion from those new numbers that came out?
Well, first of all, let's be realistic about this. You can never trust intel that comes out of aviation because even from hits that they say they hit, and this isn't just for Americans, this is true for most aviation. You've seen it on the Russian-Ukrainian conflict from both sides. They claim to make strikes, but then turns out the equipment maybe not destroyed, it's damaged, or not as many combatants were killed because it's a guesstimate. You've launched a missile. The last thing you see is its strike. Okay, we've destroyed it. Well, have you destroyed it? Quite a bit of equipment that's destroyed is actually damaged, pulled back, repaired, and put back out into order. Then there's the camouflage or maskirovka in Russian, the masking of, and we saw that in Iran putting out old equipment that's been written off. It's no longer usable, but it's made to look good. It may even have some people around it that may get struck, and the West puts out, we've destroyed the launcher, but the launcher is no longer active. Or, I mean, it got to such a ridiculous level in the first days where, and it shocked me because I didn't think you could actually do that and get away with it, is they drew life-sized, very from the air convincing pictures of equipment, and U.S. and Israel bombed the crap out of all these pictures. And you tell it's a picture because you have a helicopter on the ground that takes a missile hit, and the only thing that's burning is the hole where the missiles hit, and the outline of the helicopter is still in place. Obviously, there was no helicopter there. It was just a concrete that was painted. And helicopters and jets and launchers. And there's many other things that can be done. So you got to right off the bat count off that at least a portion of what was hit was not real, was fake or mock-ups or just old and written off equipment. Then you get the point again. Not everything that's hit is destroyed for obvious reasons. That we've seen this in combat since World War II. On the average, for example, Soviet battle tanks. Many battle tanks went through 4 or 5 refurbishments and were put back out in the field. Yeah, the crew may have been killed, but the tank was still good. They cleaned it up, fixed it, put it right back in the battlefield. And it's the same thing that happened with the Germans and others. So just because you've hit it, even if it's burnt some, doesn't mean that it's out of operations. It can't be fixed. Then there's the simple fact that U.S. had no idea how many launchers Iran has. Iran has launchers, has at least 6, if not more, giant underground missile cities, what they call. A couple of them are actually connected by miles of tunnels that lead from one to the other. In this case, they have various secret hidey holes that they can drive a launcher out of, launch, and then drive it back. So all in all, you wind up with an opponent that is much more capable than was first predicted. And I think a lot of people that were very, very pro starting this war on the Western side, well, in this case, Western side being either Israelis or the neocons, they downplayed the possibility and equipment capability of Iran to sell this war. They can't do it. It's just like we saw with, we'll take out a few people and the whole government will collapse and it'll all be great and then hunky dory. And in days, they don't have anything. They do have a lot, and we're seeing that right now. So it's all combined. And the other thing that the Iranians have been doing is they've been husbanding their equipment. What we saw with the downed American planes, we saw 2 things. First of all, obviously, actually, we saw 3 things so far. One, obviously, their anti-air capability exists. It hasn't been destroyed, just like the missile launch capability exists, because every day missiles are raining down on Israel. Every day, missiles are raining down on American bases. So obviously, they still have missiles now. Without the anti-aircraft systems there to stop the Iranian missiles, they don't have to fire in large volumes. They fire pinpoint accuracy to take out the buildings or the equipment on the ground that they want to take out. And there's almost nothing that can be done to stop those ballistic missiles from coming in. There's no interceptors, very few interceptors left to work against them. Two, from the anti-aircraft systems that we see in Iran is A, they're still there. B, Iran launched a new weapon system that the U.S. is absolutely not prepared for. It's a loitering munition. It's a loitering anti-aircraft munition. Russia has used loitering munitions from day one, where you launch a missile and the missile is just flying in circles, waiting for a target. And you either select the target as it's flying from the operator of the munition, or from drones that are also flying nearby looking for targets. And then they direct the missile onto it, so you get a response within minutes or less of an object appearing in your targeting. This case, Iran has anti-aircraft loitering munitions. This is something that's a breakthrough. Nobody else has this. So far, at least we haven't seen anybody else have it. And in this case, the systems are on automated mode. They use various sensors that have no problems picking up F-35s, because they're looking at optics and they're looking at infrared. And these systems are already in the air. So when they're not for high altitude, but they're in a medium low altitude. And when the target appears, the plane doesn't get a notification of a launch. It has minimal reaction time. A lot of times, what we saw with the F-35, they had absolutely no reaction time. The missile was striking them before they knew what was hitting them, because there's no. Normally, you get lit up by radar, then you get notification. The system picks up you're being lit up. And the system picks up there's a launch registered. This munition's already in the air, and as soon as it picks up the target, it's heading straight for the target. So it's very hard to detect, and it's very efficient, as we've seen, and effective. And on top of that, what we saw is all of these strikes on U.S. aircraft have been, if they're in Iranian airspace, they're not very deep in Iranian airspace. So the claims by U.S. and Israel that they're flying anywhere they want to, which has always been false, are still false. They're still afraid to go in deep. And they're afraid to go in deep because they know the systems are still up and operating. No matter what the media is saying, no matter what Trump is saying, they know that there's anti-aircraft umbrella still in operation. The Iranians just husband it, and they're, for example, the S-400s, the S-300 systems haven't been used as far as anybody knows. The S-400s totally have not been used. They're there.
Oh, they do have. You think they do have S-400s?
Oh, of course they do. That's not secret information. That was they had at least one full battery delivered to them with around November timeframe.
Yeah, but would they still have it now? I thought that would be one of the first things
they
targeted as part of the at the beginning of the war.
Well, you can target it if you know where it's at. If it's kept underground and it's kept husbanded for and waiting for prime targets, what a prime target in this case for an S-400 system would be the B-52s. It would be one big media win if you've got videos of a big B-52 blowing up in the air and coming down in pieces. I mean, that would be a major media win. So you husband that equipment and wait till the Americans start bringing in B-52s or B-2 bombers all the way over, and then you can target that and destroy it. And the S-400 can pick up stealth. It has the radar systems in the S-400 have no problem identifying and destroying stealth. Stealth is very overrated. It's great if you're fighting not even second tier, because Iran would be considered second tier. You're fighting third, fourth tier nations that can't reach out and touch you back. They don't have sophisticated systems. Yeah, stealth is great for more primitive, or better yet, non-existent anti-air systems. But once you get into the more modern systems, the Russian systems, the Chinese systems, they pick up stealth without much of a problem. So just counting on stealth isn't going to save
stealth, including
a plane.
So you're saying the S-400, I didn't know the S-400 could actually target the B-2. The B-52 I understand, but the B-2 would have been pretty difficult.
No, not for the S-400. That's 400. That's 500 when we get to that system. That system's designed not only to target everything in a much larger range, but it can also take out satellites. And by the S-550, you're looking at a system that can also take out low-end hypersonic missiles that the U.S. has yet to really develop. You're talking about up to Mach 7 or Mach 8 hypersonic vehicles can be taken out by the S-550. It's designed for that. So the systems are very advanced, and the key isn't just that the systems themselves. The S-400 operational and control block, it integrates other systems into it. So it can integrate S-300s, S-200s. It can integrate the Chinese systems. It can integrate the Iranian systems into one command and control block. So you start getting these layers of operational defense, and it can also integrate with aviation units in the air. So that it's quite a powerful system. The integration block on it, the command and control for its sector.
Why,
So one battery can command a large sector.
Why don't we have more aircraft that were shut down? We only have the It's surprising. We didn't talk about it yet. Where there was the F-15, and I heard there's 2 A-10s that were shot. One was brought down, one was damaged, and one of the helicopters as well during the search and rescue. Now, it's one thing is I don't understand is how they could shoot an F-15 and an A-10. The A-10 was all the way in the Strait of Hormuz, very far from where the F-15 was shot, unrelated to the search and rescue, based on what my discussion earlier today. Is how could they not shoot any aircraft throughout the entire war? That's assuming the ones in Kuwait were friendly fire, which I think they are friendly fire. I'm not sure what your stance is on them. But putting those aside, why weren't they able to shoot any other aircraft? And how could they shoot 2 of them at the same time in one day? What changed?
I have a hard time believing all those aircraft. When you have an entire flight of F-15s taken out, 3 F-15s taken out over Kuwait within minutes, I have a very hard time believing that the Kuwaitis did that. A lot of things get written off on friendly fire or mechanical issues.
How could Iran take him out in Kuwaiti airspace or near Kuwaiti airspace?
An S-300 system has a targeting range, an engagement range of 350 kilometers. That's all of Kuwait is well within range of an S-300 system. S-400 is even longer. S-400 has a 380 kilometer engagement range. S-300 350. You march off 350 kilometers, you're already deep inside Iran. These countries from that area are relatively close together. So yes, they could quite easily have done that. Plus, if you have these loitering munitions, they don't have to loiter just around Iran. You have these loitering munitions, they could be flying over Iraq, they could be flying over Kuwait. Additionally, let's look at this. This is a regional conflict. Iraq is in a war with the West, just like Iran is. Look, the fueler did not come down because of mechanical problems. The fueler over Iraq did not come down because 2 of them hit each other, which is the most ridiculous notion I've heard yet, but apparently that's what the media is now pushing. For some reason, one fueler comes down in pieces, and the second one lands with shrapnel damage to its tail fins. Okay, sure, it got shot. They collided. I mean, they're not flying over a busy airport, some landing, some taking off. They're in a combat environment. They're far enough apart. They wouldn't. There's the chance of collision are zero as far as concerned. Plus, they keep a larger distance because they have planes coming up to refuel. I learned about from a very good sources.
By the way, there is just as we're speaking. Sorry, this is not a live. Sorry, I interrupted you for some breaking news, but we're not doing this live. It'll be posted in a couple of hours. My bad. Go ahead.
No problem. I learned about the fueler coming down about an hour before it came out in the news, and the answer was Igla 2 took it out. And Igla 2 is equivalent to an upgraded Stinger missile. They could reach up to far enough up to take one out. And they were shot down. In this case, they were shot down by Iraqi militias, or maybe the Iraqi army, because Iraq is hostile territory for U.S. and Israeli forces. In fact, one of the things that may happen quite eventually, and maybe soon, is Iraq may invade Kuwait. because Kuwait's fighting against both in staging ground. So don't be surprised. Don't forget Kuwait was the 19th province of Iraq until the British cut it off and made a separate little country. All those lines, all those straight lines in the desert are all British creations, and created to keep conflicts going in the area, divide and conquer, or divide and control and rule. So yeah, that may be part of it.
So the question: how do you think that F-15 was shut down? So you talked about the loitering munitions earlier. There were talk. I had another expert on stage earlier on the show, and he talked about a heat-seeking infrared missile that the F-15 cannot track. Where do you? So the F-15 has two pilots. We know one was rescued. The other one has not been captured or rescued yet. What do you make of all the information we have on that downing? How significant is it, and how significant is it if the pilot gets captured by Iran?
Well, it's again the heat-seeking munition. That is the loitering munition. It could have also been taken out by a localized anti-aircraft system. Was it Naval? I think. No, yeah, I think it was Naval. The Iranian system. It could have also been taken out by
the Bavar. I think you mean
the Bavar. I'm sorry, the Bavar. Yeah. That's it. So it could have been one of those systems. The helicopter, the Black Hawk, was more likely damaged or taken down by small arms fire because it was trailing smoke, and there's lots of videos of all the locals shooting at it. Everybody had everywhere it flew, the valleys it was flying over. All the locals are filming themselves shooting at it with everything they have.
You talking about the helicopter or the
the Black Hawk helicopters, the Black Hawk helicopter. Yeah, that was in the rescue mission. So more and the way it's flying, streaming smoke is more like, I mean, if it had gotten hit by a missile, that Black Hawk would have gone down like a rock. Helicopters don't glide; they just fall out of the sky the moment they can't really rotate. They may spin as they're falling, but they're going to fall straight down, basically. And since it was flying and streaming smoke, that was more likely small arms fire that damaged it just from locals. The F-15, there's a pilot and then there's a weapons chief. The pilot was recovered. The weapons chief, either he survived or he didn't. Either he's captured or he isn't. We don't know. There's no way to know. Well, what's going to happen is you'll have a POW. I mean. Yeah, hopefully the U.S. isn't going to follow Israel on the Hannibal Directive. That would be pretty bad. I don't think it would. But if you're not familiar with the Hannibal Directive, the Israelis don't negotiate over their over POWs, their people being taken. They just murder them. If they can find out where they're at, they'll do everything they can to have them killed. That way you don't have to. That way you don't have to negotiate. And by the way, the Hannibal Directive isn't something that was originally part of Israeli strategy. It's something that Netanyahu brought in because it makes his life much easier. If his soldiers are taken or civilians are taken prisoner, they just have them murdered, and then you don't have to talk to the other guys. So yeah, it's a very bloodthirsty and cold-blooded approach. So at least the US doesn't do things like that.
From what I understand, the Hannibal Directive is more. It's not just kill the prison, the captured soldier, but it's more that. Do whatever you can to rescue the soldier, even if it risks his life. So it's a lot more aggressive strategy of trying to rescue the soldier.
No,
lives. A lot more aggressive than the Americans.
They tend to bomb. I mean, no, they'll kill. They'll use snipers. They'll use bombs to actually kill their soldiers and civilians that are POW'd. And we saw that on 7th of October because a lot of the civilians that were killed were actually killed by the IDF. And there's people that have admitted it. Hertz, I think is the name of the socialist newspaper. They had plenty of eyewitnesses that said that they were firing on civilians until the Israeli government shut them down. Basically, there was a lot of, and there's videos that were out from from Hamas drones that showed Israeli tanks firing directly into buildings where they were in the kibbutzes that were near where there were POWs held. I mean, not POWs in this case, hostages, because they're civilians. And they were firing directly into it. And there were people that survived, said, they killed everybody. They killed the Hamas guys and they killed all the Israelis that were being held hostage.
So on the American side, it's a very different process whenever there's any captured soldier.
Right. It's a civilized process because what the Israelis are doing is absolutely not civilized. Right. killing your own and as a first option, or as even a second option, is not a civilized approach. Yeah, the Americans will, of course, if they can't rescue them, then they'll go into negotiations, or at least try to send the Red Cross to check how the people are treated, and then wait till after the conflict to get them back, or in some kind of negotiated process. So yeah, so at least that. The problem for any pilot, I'll tell you this: the problem for any pilot that goes down over enemy territory is surviving long enough to get taken by enemy soldiers, by the actual military. Because the worst thing that happens to most pilots when they're down over enemy territory is they get caught by civilians. Civilians rarely follow any Geneva Conventions. They'll just kill a lot of times they'll just kill the pilots on the spot as revenge for being bombed. That happens quite often, actually. So your best bet, if you can't get rescued by your guys, is get captured by regular military forces on the other side.
I don't know if they're killing though, because there's a reward. There's a bounty for any information leading to the capture of the pilot. I think $60,000 now, $90,000. So that would make it less likely for the civilians to kill him.
Yeah.
And from what I understand as well, the pilots have a little cloth or a card in different languages that says, "Hey, if you help me survive, if you help American forces rescue me, there's a financial reward that will be given to you." So that could also help his survival.
Yeah, but people have just watched their town get bombed are usually not in any condition to help the guy that was doing the bombing. They're in the condition to tear him to pieces. So yeah, it may, and I think the reason the Iranian government obviously put that bounty up is they want him alive. They don't want the locals to kill him, and that happens constantly. I mean, locals tend to get pissed off. Somebody's dropping bombs on their families, and just because the rule says that you have to capture and treat POWs humanely and to hand them over, doesn't mean the local citizens are going to do that, especially when they're pissed off, if they've taken family losses. So yes, I think the Iranian government did exactly so that the civilians don't kill the guy when they find him. They hand him over to the military. So
all right, so let's go back to the
way I'd be looking at that.
Mm-hmm. So we've seen, have you been keeping track of the amount of missiles that we're firing on Israel? Because the amount of missiles, the volume of missiles has dropped significantly. It picked up again in the last few days, but more importantly, especially on Passover Day, but more importantly, the amount of missiles that are passing through air defenses have increased. Now, you spoke earlier about the air defense munitions being low. Mm-hmm. How low do you really think they are? And doesn't that put, because there's, two contradictory theories here. Number one is that the air defense systems are low on munitions. That means Israel wants this war to end just as much as Trump wants it to end. And the other argument is that, because a lot of people are saying Israel doesn't want this war to end, otherwise they wouldn't kill the negotiator. They tried to kill the former foreign minister a few days ago that was brokering the peace deal in Pakistan, among other people. So they've killed negotiators or ones that are facilitating the negotiations in the last few weeks. But if that's the case, they wouldn't do that if they want the war to end. So does Israel want the war to end, or they want it to drag on longer? Can they afford to have it drag on for longer?
Well, first of all, you got to remember too, Israel is not a monolith country. Israel has factions. Israel has different people with different agendas. When we're dealing with Netanyahu, whose family from day one was in Miami, Florida, his wife and son. His son's 29. He's as far as I know, he's never served in the Israeli army. He's never served in any conflicts. That's for sure. He lives for Israel. He doesn't die for Israel. When you see that kind of that's got to be demoralizing when you hear that your president's kid isn't going to be risking his life, but you need to be risking your life for these orders. The Netanyahu needs this war. Some people think that he's got a messianic drive because a Chabad rabbi told him that he was going to be the one to hand the flag of Israel over to the Messiah. Other people are just saying, he's just using religion when he needs to because he's absolutely a-religious. It's just he's a power-mad maniac. And the third portion is there are major criminal investigations that were launched against him. He's got massive charges of corruption against him and his wife. The moment this war's over or the conflicts are over, he's more than likely going to jail. I think that's what scares him most of all, is hearing that
unless the president
cage closed behind him. Well, but I doubt it. The president would pardon him at this point. So as prime minister, he's jail bound. That's why he's trying to change the judicial system that caused a massive that caused massive riots in Israel before all this started. And by the way, you've now had plenty of witnesses come forward that said, we were told to stand down on October 7th. I mean, there was even recorded messages from command. Somebody was smart enough to record the radio transmissions that told them, we don't know why, but we're told to stand down, do not approach the fencing. More likely, people will say this in the conspiracy theory, but it's looking more and more like the Israeli government knew this was about to happen, and they allowed it to happen because it gave them the political and the moral position, at least inside Israeli society, to do what they're doing now, which is commit genocide on their neighbors. And it quieted down and eliminated a lot of these protests. And in an emergency situation, they can also shut those protests down. We've seen the Israeli police savagely beating Israeli protesters. We're not talking Palestinians here or whomever, but actual Israeli, Jewish Israeli protesters. So there's that position. To Netanyahu, this war is a godsend and keeps him out of jail and keeps him in power. And Ben Gavir, who's a psychopath, he's quite happy with this. Then you've got elements. You've got a growing opposition to the war in general. It's only about 20% of the population so far, but it's growing. And the number of protests are growing. In fact, people are streaming out of Israel. There's videos that came out of the Egyptian crossing, just giant lines of people waiting to cross into Egypt by foot, Israelis. The airports, the planes are flying out less than half full, and that's quote for safety. Reality is to keep people from fleeing en masse. And then the last full call up they had of 300,000.
The aircraft, civilian aircraft are leaving Israel half full. What's that? Is that a policy?
Yes, that's a policy. That's actually a policy. They're quoting it for safety reasons, but they're really doing it because the population is running. And let's not forget, more than half the Israelis have a second passport. They have dual citizenship. Quite a few of them, probably the majority of them, with America or the UK. So yeah, they suddenly remember, I have another passport, and let's go home. Particularly the settler elements. They're mostly coming. A lot of these settlers are mostly coming from the U.S. So they just pop back on a plane and fly back out, at least until the conflict's over. So that's one element of it. Then you've got a lot of the on the Israeli side, the military, for example, is screaming bloody murder. Out of 300,000 men call up, only 200,000 showed up. 1/3 refused to show up or gone. So when they said, let's call another 450,000. Well, first of all, Israel's not rubber. You can't stretch Israel forever. It's got a relatively small population. You're looking at a population of pre-war population about 9 million people. You figure about half of those are children underage, so you're down to about 4.5 million adults. Figure at least 1 million of those are too old to fight. So now you're looking at about 3 million population that can possibly fight, and by the way, are also the main workers in the economy. And you're looking at taking out 700,000-800,000 of those. Basically a fourth of your workforce. Economically, you're killing your country on the spot. So there's a lot of problems. So from the military side,
I think they want the war to end. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, from the military side, they do want the war to end. The military side has realized they're in a fight they cannot win. And Iran, again, they start screaming, oh, we didn't think they had that many missiles. I don't know why Iran told you they had about that many missiles and they would do what they did. I think the problem is these Western politicians are so used to lying. When somebody tells them the truth, they don't believe it because they lie all the time, or they bluff. That's just another word for lying. And when the Iranians said, we're not bluffing, we're going to do what we're going to do, and they do what they said they do, everybody's shocked because, oh my God, somebody's actually told the truth. How can we figure on that one? So that's the situation we're looking at right there. I think the outside of Netanyahu, Ben Gurion, and these other people, the majority of the Israeli government wants peace. Now, I'm not saying they suddenly love Iran or Arabs. They more likely still want to exterminate them if they can, but they're not. They've realized they've bitten off so much more than they can chew, and they're choking on it, and they want out of this conflict. Now, will the government in Israel allow them to get out of this conflict, just like for the Americans? I don't know. Right now, the U.S. would have to find some way to control Netanyahu and the people around him. because that's the spoilers. The Israelis are now the spoilers, and unless they decide there's going to be a peace, they're doing everything they can to make sure there is no peace. There's no negotiations that they even start. So, and for them again, as I said, Israel is looking to try to shift all the trade out of the Middle East, at least away from the Gulf Arabs, to itself. That's the short route. Just build gas pipelines. Of course, gas pipelines like that, even if they decided to build them, you're talking 3, 4, 5 years of construction. That wouldn't save the world from the shock it's already in. So there's that issue. So
that's more of a long-term, not a long-term strategy. It's more of a long-term wishful thinking. I just don't see
right. It's medium-term strategy. Let's not forget. I mean, we saw Netanyahu about 3 years ago get up in front of the UN, the curse. It knows Iran, Iraq, Syria, and kind of like Turkey, and the promise where he's showing trade routes going out of the Persian Gulf across land into Israel. That's his wet dream at this point. We'll just and they're doing what they can. I mean, you already had Mossad agents that were arrested from on the second day. They were arrested in Saudi Arabia and in Qatar, trying to blow up infrastructure to make it look like Iran hit it.
Really?
That was it. Yeah, it was in the news. It was the second day in. They were trying to blow up Aramco infrastructure. So this is not new. And then you had mystery drones flying into Azerbaijan. You had mystery missiles flying into Turkey. You've had plenty of politicians, including the foreign minister of Turkey, just flat out said, okay, we know this isn't Iranian. More than likely, these are Israeli missiles coming in to try to get us into this war. So they're trying to get everybody into a big fight because they think they can, well, at least elements in the Israeli government think that they can monopolize trade and they can come out ahead if everybody else butchers each other off.
On the Mossad members, because I remember seeing those reports, because both Saudi and Qatar said that was not true. You think it's still true, even though they're denying it, that Mossad were caught in the countries conducting a false flag attack? The only reason I'm asking that is I just find it very unlikely that Israel would want to sabotage those relationships they've spent so long to build. They've just weakened their biggest enemy. They're trying to build better relations with the other neighbors, which will help them in continuing to weaken Iran. I just think that sabotaging a false flag attack in Qatar, less so. I think Qatar is more likely, but to do it in Saudi or in the UAE, countries that are relatively neutral or friendly to Israel.
I think the Israelis are seeing, they smell blood in the water and they're going for the kill. They get everybody. Look, let's not forget that from the river to the river, which nobody's hiding anymore. That's the big goal. They wear the patches. Smolich was the Minister of Finance was on telling a journalist early on, about a year and a half ago, all about the river to the river. It's all ours because God told Abraham his descendants would own it. Interesting enough, by the way, the Palestinians and the Arabs in those areas are also descendant from Abraham. So, whose descendants from Abraham now becomes a question if we look at it. But they consider river to river. Mecca and Medina is within that territory that they plan on grabbing, flat out. And Smolich said, we're going to clean up Mecca and Medina, basically, wipe out the Muslim population there. I read it as that. So to get the Saudis into a fighting war, why not? If it weakens them. Get everybody to kill each other off, and then you can monopolize on the trade and possibly on the territory. If you look at it very cold-bloodedly, I mean, look, just for as an example of the British in World War One, the British and in World War Two, the British aim, in particular in World War One, when they allied with Imperial Russia, the Imperial British, their aim wasn't just to destroy the German Empire. Their aim was to destroy the German Empire and the Russian Empire, and weaken everybody else on the continent. So for the Israelis to act basically the same way, even toward their own allies, that's nothing new. That would be actually amazing if they didn't try to do something like that.
Stanislav, really appreciate your time as always, man. Thank you so much for making it work despite the technical issues, and good to have you back on the show.
Yep. Thank you.